Hey, good morning. Hello. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we gather. Here in the Shrine Room, that's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and extend that respect to the lands which you are variously on in Zoom land. And I'd like to wrap that respect in the respect that we feel for the eldership tradition of the First Nations of this country. As Shannon mentioned, my name's Dane. I'm a Mitra here, and I've been hanging out here for a few years, maybe enough to illuminate a bit of a sense of what we're doing here. What the processes of Buddhism is, but there's a big but. I'm not an expert. I will be sharing things today that are from my experience and my opinion. But as always, if pain persists, please talk to an order member. They know better than I do, so take what I do with a pinch of salt. The topic that I set myself for today is fear, because it's a real and present topic for me in my life. And as of midnight last night, I had half a talk written. I haven't had much sleep. This one was difficult to pull out. And perhaps you can help me today. Can people please tell me either what your strongest fear is, or, if that's a bit too personal, a fear that people feel? Come on, chuck them out.
Being alone.
Aloneness, yes.
Full hill.
Yeah.
I have a fear of my mind. I used to. I think I've overcome that. Now I just have a fear of becoming.
A fear of becoming.
A fear of becoming decrepit.
Okay.
And useless.
Right.
You're trusting.
Disgrace.
Yeah, losing my mind.
Not being under control.
Control. Yeah.
Fear of humiliation.
Mm-hmm.
As I get older, can you hear us?
Good one. Sorry, I can't hear you online, but that was fear of humiliation. There was some shame, disgrace, pain. What was it?
Lack of meaning.
Lack of meaning and decrepitude. I think that's enough for now. We're getting some general flavors here, right? Of course, there's another very common shared one. There's all the phobias, right? There's another big one, which is public speaking. My first talk here, I was actually petrified and shaking. It starts to get a little bit easier with time. I'm actually not that scared right now. That's that kind of repeated exposure therapy, I guess you'd call it. But yeah, talking in front of people is another common one. Digging into the nature of the topic today, I got to thinking, where does fear start? When do we first start experiencing fear? Has anyone heard of the Morrow response? Parents in the room? This is what happens when you're born in a modern healthcare setting. One of the first things the medical attendants will do with a brand newborn baby is hold the baby and then go like that. Because the Morrow response, this newborn baby, if it has the normal reactions, even though it's fresh out, will go like that and then go like that and sometimes cry. Within seconds of birth, we have a startle, a fear response that's programmed into our genes, into our neural responses. Now, I'm only going to lightly touch on brain science today, don't worry. So let's just call that primal fear. Primal because it seems to be programmed into our genes and our survival responses. It's not routed through our thinking minds. A baby doesn't have that yet. It just knows if its head goes below its body, it gets a sense of falling. So this primal fear that I'm going to unpack a little bit now, I'm going to bundle that into this one that I think we all know a bit about, and that's the fight, flight, and freeze response. I'm going to call that a primal fear as well. And I invite you to recall what that feels like. You know, when you have felt scared, like proper scared. For me, that's an increase in heart rate. That's a short, shallow breathing. That's a clench in muscles here. That's my eyesight narrowing in. And even more in my brain state, I will start losing critical analytic functions. My thinking will start to go a bit more black and white. I'll start having more kind of choice-oriented physical response. This is what I'm calling primal fear, that panic fear. What can we do with this type of fear? Now, I did try and do a bunch of digging into various Buddhist sources for this talk, and I haven't come out on a very prescribed path, I guess you would call it. But some of the early diggings I was doing was what to do with this big fear. In Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara, it says, if a person is cutting off my limbs, I should meditate on compassion and endure the harm with a peaceful mind. Similarly, in the Jataka tales, the story of one of the Buddha's previous lives, he allowed soldiers to cut off his hands, feet, nose and ears without reacting with fear or hatred. What to do with that? I guess first, often in those stories, they're stories that are told in an extreme way to make a point. It's what makes them an impactful story. And also, maybe there is a state of attainment where someone would sit through those conditions with equanimity, but I'm a long way from having a sense of that. Fortunately, I'm rarely in a situation that's life or death, where I have to deal with that kind of extreme level of fear or danger. And I'm sure I could take up the whole morning with an ethical debate about the karmic impacts of defending myself or a loved one if they were being attacked. But I just don't think it would be very helpful, and particularly in the setting that we're in this morning. Maybe we can come back to that in the group chats. But for now, how about if we take primal fear and kind of bring it down the tree a little bit? I'd like to tell a personal story of how I experienced a medium strong fear recently. Variously throughout my professional career, I've worked in events, and I find myself back in that situation now, having sworn off it several times because it's got me near to death a few times. The amount of stress, the highs, the lows, the fears, it's a real lot to take doing an event. And yeah, sometimes I wish I could just have a normal job, but I just keep finding myself back here. Recently, I took on maybe the most significant event of my life so far. I'm not going to name it, but it was a big deal. 17 performing acts and installation works in 3 theatres, dinner with 400 people and 20 international ambassadors and some quite high-profile people. It was quite an event, and there was a lot riding on it, a lot of reputation at stake. There was a lot of fear in me and a lot of fear in people around me as well. And I tell you what, it really rattled me like I haven't been rattled in ages. I was losing sleep. I was freaking out. Meditation wasn't helping. Walking wasn't helping. But there were three things that I did that helped turn the tide for me. The first is very mundane. I went to the doctor and I got some mood stabilising medication. The second is very human. It was a time of shared vulnerability that helped bring me and my partner Anita together. And we cared for each other, and with some beautiful tenderness, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. And the third is perhaps beyond human. Does everyone here know what a bodhisattva is? You're getting nods. Shudha introduced me to this, and it really struck me strongly. Something I'd never tried before, and that was asking Green Tara for help. Now, I'm not one that tends to have a main line to the mystical realm. It still feels very strange and unnatural to me. But I think the combination of the practice I've been putting in, and the need brought me to a place where I could ask for help and receive it. And I guess that's the first kind of major vector of working with fear that I'm talking about today. And I'm calling this the surrender approach. That's asking for help and surrendering to receiving it. I did it both medication, interpersonal care, and I'll call it mystic care. I'm sure to many of you, that's not maybe half the room. That's not such a big surprise, asking for help and receiving it. But as a bloke, it's not my natural state. So it was quite surprising. Hey, this is a really helpful thing. Okay. So we've got that's a surrender approach for me. Now, the second way of working with fear that I've come across is transforming it. But this is very easy to get wrong. As a member of our species, I'm sure we've all seen what happens when people deflect fear instead of transforming it. And there are two very common responses to fear. The first is anger. How dare you threaten me? Get off my lawn. Anger is a very popular response, and so much so that some people don't even realise they've felt fear before they have an anger response. There's a main highway in the synaptic connections. And the other big one is avoidance. This, for anyone that knows me well, this is my favourite one. You can keep running away from fear and almost escape it. I got to Olympic level skill with avoidance. I've kind of dropped off my game a little bit, but I feel like I could still compete in an amateur league. Yeah, running away from it works for a while. Okay, so avoidance. But this is not the type of transformation I'm talking about. And actually, what was I saying about primal fear? The capital F fear, fight, flight, or freeze. Doesn't it seem right that anger and avoidance are kind of like the dialed down version of that? And what about a little dash of fear? Is it likely that not anger, not fighting, maybe that's just a bit annoyance would be the response to that, to a dash? And maybe the avoidance factor would be just making a mental note not to be in that situation again and not even noticing that we've decided to avoid this little dash of fear. So if these are the same responses but in mild doses, it started to make sense to me when I was putting this talk together. The Sangharakshita said, all fear is a fear of death. He didn't mean we're constantly in mortal peril. He meant that the only fear is primal fear, just at different volumes. I can get with that. And I think he really nailed the nature of fear from a different angle too. All fear is a fear of death presupposes something in the future. When you think about the things that we were scared about at the start, decrepitude, we were talking about shame, we were talking about loss of control. All of these things are pitched forward in time. They're generally all predictions of future states. Now, if you've ever actually been in a true emergency, like a sudden emergency, you're not scared. All you've got to do is react. And it actually the fear comes later. And that's your body kind of catching up with the response that you're actually making in real time. We preempt discomfort, pain and loss, and that's what's causing fear. Fear is the predictive response to our understanding of the first noble truth. Okay. I'm going to tell a second story now. And I apologise for people that I've already kind of started cracking away at this one with, but it's very present for me at the moment. Probably my favourite Sydney festival these days is called the Festival of Dangerous Ideas. And I've been going to it for a few years now. If I had a major criticism of it, it's that the ideas are actually kind of really dangerous. It's very lefty. It's very kind of in a West, people that can afford to go to Carriage Works on a weekend and maybe get some flowers on the way. So it all tends to be people that are agreeing with each other about how dangerous this is. Finally, an actually dangerous idea, and it's shook me. It was this guy, a talk by this guy named Professor Jem Bendel. He started his career, he's a very exceptional guy. He started his career working in the intersection between corporate social responsibility and green projects. So carbon offset, ways that big companies can invest in forests or ethically sourcing materials. And he was quite a spokesman for these projects with the United Nations, with TED Talks. He's well published, taught at Ivy League universities. He was a poster child for this stuff. But along the way, he went, well, I really need to be around the science on this stuff. And so he's reading the IPCC reports, that's the International Panel on Climate Change. And further than that, he's reading the science that feeds into those reports. So he's going and reading the peer-reviewed studies. He wrote a paper called Deep Adaptation, which became one of the foundational papers of the Extinction Rebellion movement. So I'm listening to this guy talk and listening to, very eloquent, going, okay, yeah. And then he lays out in 9 points what he calls the myth of the green fairy tale, and very succinctly explained something that I've kind of been aware of, I've kind of had some thoughts around. And he said, it's just too late. It's just too late to stop catastrophic climate change. And he said, his prediction is the next 10 years, we're going to see society-wide collapse, ecosystem-wide collapse, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. And it rocked me hearing someone like that get up in that situation and put it that way. And so I had a lot of feelings, and it stirred up a sense of hopelessness and fear. So I bought his book and I watched his YouTube videos. And I've been sitting with it for a while, and I still have fear, but I'm starting to find a way of being with it. And I'll quote from from his documentary that's on YouTube. Many people say that not hoping for anything at all is a problem rather than it being liberating. So there's this general idea that hope is good and necessary. Away from modernist culture, wisdom traditions teach us something completely different. A phrase in Buddhism is that hope and fear chase each other's tails. Buddha himself also talks about there being three kinds of people: the one who's hopeful, the one who's hopeless, and the one who's done away with hope. Hope is about being attached to a future desired state where a current sense of suffering or uncomfortableness has gone away. With hope, you're not being in the present moment. The idea is the more hope you have, the more fear you have. And I think that this was put perhaps even more succinctly and in a completely different conversation by my partner Anita here, who said hope is fear with wings. Now, my natural inclination is to think, but without hope, how can we be motivated to fix things? Without fear, how can we give ourselves the best possible chance to make a world-saving change? So let's bring it back to those most common responses to fear. Avoidance. We're sunbaking in August, and then we go home and watch Netflix, we browse on the dating apps, we practice our spirituality. This is the lobster enjoying the warm bath. And then there's anger. There's plenty of people that we can be angry at. Colonists, industrialists, baby boomers, the patriarchy. There's plenty of anger fruit that we can pick. But to my mind, neither of these reactions will have a net positive impact on the world or on my own fear in any lasting way. So how do we transform this fear? If fear already has us in its grip, it's all well and good to say, don't worry about it, it's all in your head. But I'm still feeling it. What I am finding that helps is how Milarepa dealt with it. In response to his fear demons, he said, it's wonderful that you demons have come here. You're welcome to stay as long as you like, but let's see who will outlast who. With that understanding that the fear must change in time, because it is of a future thing, he set his awareness to notice the difference. And in so doing, he depowered the fear. This changes in time. In fact, it's the only reliable thing. I used to hate it when my mum would drop aphorisms on me. But this is the deep and mystical truth behind this too shall pass. Damn it, Mum. Right again. This is the transformational approach to working with fear, is to see it as time-based and release it. The surrender approach to working with fear I shared in 3 ways before. Milarepa also did this working with his last demon. He said, if you demons are here to eat me, go ahead. There's nothing here to defend. My body is an illusion. My mind is empty. Do what you will. Or put in another way from the Heart Sutra. So know that the Bodhisattva, holding on to nothing whatsoever, but dwelling in prajna wisdom, is freed of delusive hindrance, rid of the fear bred by it, and reaches clearest nirvana. My conclusion is fear is a deeply held life-saving instinct that we allow to become the closest friend of our ego identity. We can cut the cords that tie these two together without losing the capacity to use that energy to respond in life-saving ways. This is from the Shambhala Mind Training Verses written by an order member named Akupa. He said, sit with the hatred until you feel the fear beneath it. Sit with fear until you feel the compassion beneath that. Okay, I'm done now. I do have some questions for Bruce. Anger avoidance, what's your favourite flavour? And what are some of the more subtle ways that you express this in your behaviour? So anger or avoidance. And what do you think about Jem Bendel's provocation? If he's right, how do you predict your fear will express itself?
Wonderful.